We are now at question 89. Does the Qur'an say that Allah has two hands? The answer is no. Who would ask this question? Yani, the way it's posed here. So Wahhabi might ask you that here he's testing you. He thinks he's going to trap you or something. If you say yes, he's going to say okay, and then say whatever he wants to say. If you say no, then he's going to attempt to refute you by bringing you the ayat that you know we're going to mention, inshallah. Or who might ask this question? This might be the question of someone who learned the right belief and he didn't learn about anything like this. And then he encountered someone who said this about Allah and said this about the Qur'an. So then he goes back and he asks, does the Qur'an say that Allah has two hands? He's confused. That Wahhabi would have told him, if that's what Allah said, then that's what Allah said. That poor one, he would have said, for example, Allah is not like the creations. What are you saying? The Wahhabi's going to say, yeah, Allah is not like the creations. If he said he has two hands, he has two hands. So the direct answer is no. The Qur'an doesn't say that. So then someone might say, well, where did they get this from? What gave them such an idea? And the answer is that because they're literalists and they found some things in the Qur'an that they thought is evidence, and also the hadiths that they thought is evidence for Allah having two hands. So they don't really know what nothing is like him means. Don't forget, for Wahhabi, Laysa kamithlihi shay, nothing is whatsoever like him, is not muhkam. That's not definitive and explicit. For Wahhabi, it's the other way. That one is ambiguous. Needs clarity that nothing is like him. That needs clarity. For Wahhabi, what doesn't need clarity? To say Allah has two hands. Doesn't. For Wahhabi, very clear this one. So then when we say nothing is like Allah, it doesn't mean what you might think. Doesn't mean to negate direction and place from him and body altogether. That's how the Wahhabi understands. Which ayat are those? There are two of them. The first one, as you know, is going to be the ayah about Adam alayhi salam. Ya Iblisu ma manaka an tasjuda lima khalaqtu biyaday. O Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to what I created biyaday? They will say it means by my two hands. For Wahhabi, that's very explicit. And they will say also Allah says, Bal yadahu mabthutatan. In fact, they would say it means his two hands are widespread. And also there's some hadiths that they refer to. So this is what they found in the Qur'an that gave them the idea, gave them the false impression that Allah has two hands. And someone might say, can you say that? Can you say the Qur'an, this Qur'an gave them the wrong idea? It gave them false impression? Yes. That's what Imam al-Rifa'i meant when he said, beware of taking by the apparent meanings of what is ambiguous from the book or the sunnah, for indeed that is a foundation of blasphemy. And that's what's meant when Allah Ta'ala says, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Allah misguides many by the Qur'an. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. And He guides many by the Qur'an. That's an important ayah to remind a person, because someone would think, my reference is from the Qur'an. I'm giving you something from the Qur'an. So even if you're wrong here, and you're committing blasphemy, Okay, so then what do these mean? Goes back to that rule, which is what here? Same thing we said about the hadith of the slave girl. Who can tell me what I'm talking about? Same thing we said about the ayah of istiwa. Same thing we said about the hadith of nuzul in terms of interpreting. The answer is there's two ways to interpret these ambiguous texts. Now, the Wahhabi might say it's not ambiguous. Tell him slow down. There's two ways to interpret these ambiguous texts. One way is to say Allah knows what it means without me determining, or without anyone, or without having to determine exactly what it means. But it doesn't mean the apparent meaning, though. When we say, and this is important, when we say here in this context, Allah knows what it means, that's a way of saying we're not taking it as it appears. Allah knows what it means, whether we take it as it appears or we don't take it as it appears. So when we say Allah knows what this means, what we're saying is here, what we're hinting at is that we're not taking it apparently, though. So that right there is an alternative interpretation in itself. That's called ta'wil ijmali, non-specific alternative interpretation. Then when we do that, what do? We just stick to the Arabic wording, and we're not even translating this. So we don't say hand. We say Allah has attributed with yad. And some Sunni Muslims might say hand, but I would argue that they could strengthen their wording. They could do better than that. Yani, they don't believe Allah. They don't believe like Wahhabis, but they might say the hand of Allah has an attribute. Yani, they translate yad and they say hand, and they don't have belief of Wahhabis. I would advise anyone like that to not do that. I'd advise you just to say, for these attributes, yad, wajh, ayn, etc. Now right now we are slightly digressing. We're going to come back. Because right here, Wahhabi is going to say, but let me ask you a question though. You say though that Allah has knowledge and power and will. We already discussed this. But right here, again, Yani, no problem with bringing this right here. Then we get back on track, inshallah. The Wahhabi will say, boy, you say knowledge and power and will. What's the problem with face and hand and eye? And answer is to say hand, face, and eye. In a literal sense, those are concrete nouns, concretes. That means the literal sense of them is something physical, is something composed, is a created object, concrete noun. But knowledge, power, will, these are not objects in their literal sense. They are abstract. So there's not any attribution of a body to Allah by saying he has knowledge, power, will, sight, hearing, speech, life. There is no attribution of a body to him, Azza wa Jal. As for those other ones, then you want to add face, hands, eyes, and then what Wahhabi wants to add also emotions and love and hate and etc. So here, these 13 attributes that are obligatory to attribute to Allah, translating them literally is no problem. Not a single one of them alludes to Allah having or being a body. These other attributes that are from the mutashabih verses of the Qur'an, and so it is said they are mutashabih attributes, ambiguous attributes, these ones should not be translated. Now, getting back to the ayat, getting back to the issue of the explanation. What does it mean then if we're not going to translate it? So we said there's two ways to explain. One is to just confirm what came in the Qur'an, and then, don't translate it or anything. Confirm what came in the Qur'an, yad, ayn, istiwa, wajh, and say, Allah knows what it means, with the meaning that it's not literal, though. And then that's it. Whatever it means is befitting. The other way is to assign a particular meaning that complies with two things. Not only the language, but also the religion. Complies with the language and the religion. Wahhabis here are lacking in both departments. In language, they are garbage, and in religion, they are garbage. Religion here means fundamental rules of religion, aqeedah in particular. So there's a good chance that if you got into a debate with a Wahhabi about this issue of hands, or yad, or yadan, that maybe you won't convince him. You need to have your references. What do you want to do in these discussions? You want to benefit the person. You want to help the person. That's correct, the intention. But also there's other goals, like defending the religion. You might need to defend the religion here. That's your goal. Or to protect the Muslims. Like what? You found yourself in a community. Those Muslims, they didn't know about Wahhabis. And then a Wahhabi comes around. And you know about Wahhabis. And then he starts spreading his misguidance. Starts saying things to them. So then you need to protect those Muslims. That goes hand in hand with defending the religion there. These are some of your goals. So then, if these are your goals, if these are your intentions, then how far do you take these discussions? I say, either try to convince the person you're talking to. That's the best thing. To convince him so that he would say what's right. So you're going to correct your intention. Maybe you don't think he will listen to you, but maybe he will. Who knows? Correct your intention. I remind myself. Try to convince him. But if you can't do that, then I say silence him. Silence him. And whenever you silence him, be silent too. Don't say anything. Once you silence him, don't say anything. Just be silent. And then you'll see. Will he stay silent or will he start talking again? And then you're going to know the type of person you're dealing with. So maybe you're not going to convince a Wahhabi here about yet. He's so convinced. The ayah to him is crystal clear. So what does it mean? I said that to basically set up here. What would it be? What would an alternative explanation be? It would be something that it's likely a Wahhabi won't accept. Doesn't mean it's false though. That's why I said all of that. Which is what? Like what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said. Khalas, let's see his quotes so you can see the quote. And I'll explain for you. Here's the quote of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani taken from Fathul Bari. He said, وقال غيره هذا يساق مساق التمثيل للتقريب. Others said, so it's talking, he was saying something already. We snatched a snippet of what he said here. He says, and others said, this verse was put forth to approximate an understanding. Yusaqu masaqa tamthil. So yusaqu means it was put forth. It was given a flow, and it was given a wording, a phrasing. Masaqa tamthil. It was put forth It was given a flow, but a flow that's for making an example. That's for conveying a meaning, yani. Litaqrib, for approximation. It means to make you understand something. That means not literal. لأنه عهد أن من اعتنى بشيء واهتم به, because it's known that anyone who takes care of something, من اعتنى بشيء, or anyone who gives heed to something, whoever takes care of something or gives heed to something, واهتم به, and he takes care of it. It's important to him. باشره بيديه, then he will engage it with both hands. So that's the meaning of the mentioning of al-yadan. It's to hint the status of Adam, not to say God has two hands. فيستفاد من ذلك أن العناية بخلق آدم كانت أتم من العناية بخلق غيره. It is thus promoted from that the heed given to the creation of Adam was more excellent than that of other creations. So a statement like that, Wahhabi doesn't accept. But he's going to ask you, what is it supposed to mean then, though? So then when you tell him, he's going to say, huh? What? But really, though, whatever you told him, that's what he's going to say. It's like what we mentioned about hadith of nuzul. How did some scholars explain hadithul nuzul, descending? They said it refers to the mercies that come down. It says yanzilu rabbuna, our Lord comes down, if you translate it literally. They said the meaning is the descent of the mercies. Yani, whenever you have a figurative meaning, then the words that are there that are not to be taken literally, they should have some significance to the figurative meaning you're getting at. So, because yet singular form, it has a literal meaning, and it has also figurative usages. So, for Wahhabi, he's saying it's so clear because it's in dual form. It's like he's saying, I can see if it's only singular form, yet then maybe it's easier for me to conceive that a figurative meaning is meant. But it's not easy for him, though, really. He's saying, but it has dual form. So this makes it clear for me that no figurative meaning is meant. So what we're saying is, no, there is still a figurative meaning meant. So what is that? Like what Ibn Hajar says here. The figurative meaning, yani, the significance of mentioning the dual form is not the two hands in a literal sense, but why someone who has two hands would use both of them. If someone had two hands, why would he use both of them? He has two of them. Why would he use both of them? He would use both of them when whatever he's handling is important or delicate. Now, this is not likening Allah to the creations. Only if you take it literally as likening Allah to the creations. Because we're saying it doesn't mean two real hands. So it's not like creations. It means the importance and status of Adam alayhi salatu wassalam. So if you were to say this to a Wahhabi in simple words, just having a conversation, a down-to-earth conversation, and he says to you, well, what is it supposed to mean? And then you were to say, well, it means that Adam's creation is so great and important because if someone handles something with both hands, it's because it's important. It's because it's important. He gives heed to it. So that Wahhabi then, he's going to be like, I don't know, you're not convincing me. So then All right, should be enough for you that Allah is not like the creations, but you can't understand that. So you're not still not going to stop. So now I'm going to silence you, inshallah. هكذا. And here's some important ayat for you to remember. This ayah of Surah Sad, ayah 45. واذكر عبادنا إبراهيم وإسحاق ويعقوب أولي الأيدي والأبصار. Recall our slaves, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Ulil Aidi, very literally, those who had hands. Wal Absar, and visions. They had hands and visions, or hands and eyes. Yani hands and visions. So, okay, so what about it? You say to them, is this what the ayah means? They had hands? That's what it literally says. Ulil Aidi. They had hands? That's what the ayah means, Wahhabi? He'll say, no, it doesn't mean that. That's true. You're right. It doesn't mean that. So what's wrong with you? When it came to human beings who have hands, and then Allah told us, Ulil Aidi, those who had hands. You put both of those together. He said, these ones, they do have hands. And Allah told us that they are the people who have hands. And I put those together, and I say in conclusion that it doesn't mean literal hands. That's what you did, Wahhabi. But when it came to Allah Ta'ala, that was more difficult for you. When it came to the one who's not like the creations, that was more difficult for you. Here's their translation from what they call the Noble Qur'an translation they have. Copy paste. They said, and remember our slaves, Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub, all owners of strength in worshiping us, and also of religious understanding. It doesn't say hands. That's official Wahhabi translation there. That's one they send anywhere for free, and they translated it into so many languages. So, and what about the other ayah? بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. It means he is generous. If you want to see the details there, review previous lessons, and it's in the book too. It means he's generous. Allah says right after that, يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. He gives as he wills. It doesn't mean he has two hands. That ayah is a refutation of the Jews who said that Allah is stingy. And they said Allah is stingy. They said that by phrasing it, God's hand is shackled, singular. They said God's hand is shackled. They're saying he's stingy. He's a miser. That's blasphemy, of course. So Allah refuted them. And he used the dual form in refuting what they said in the singular form. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. Rather, he is exceedingly generous. يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. He gives as he wills. Question 90. Is the usage of the dual form not strong evidence for two hands? No, it's not. Yani, basically, the Wahhabi understands that dual form is off limits to figurative speech. Dual form is off limits to figure of speech. That's basically Wahhabi understanding. Dual form is not off limits to figurative speech. Neither the singular form, nor the dual form, nor the plural forms of words are off limits to figurative speech. So let's see some of our references. You'll need them, inshallah. The dua for nusuk, hajj, and umrah. لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك. لبيك, that's dual form. Lab means obedience. Lab, that's singular. Lab, an instance of obedience. So, labain, that's two obediences. Yani, it's a dual form. So, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. It doesn't mean, I obey you twice, oh Allah. I obey you twice. That's it. It means, I obey you again and again. Or it means, I am constantly in your obedience, oh Allah. That's like the ayah in Surah Al-Mulk. ثُمَّ رُجِعِ الْبَصَرَ كَرَّتَيْنِ. Look twice. Doesn't mean only two times. Al-Tabari said, كَرَّتَيْن مَرَّةً بَعْدَ أُخْرَى. Look again and again. Look time and again. And we have something else too. 57th verse of Surah Al-A'raf. بَيْنَ يَدَيْ رَحْمَتِهِ. So very literally translated would be between the hands of his mercy, between the two hands of his mercy, between the two hands of his mercy. So his mercy has two hands? No. Yani, Wahhabi really should be stumped with this one. That's a good one, I think. I never used it on a Wahhabi though. But I can't reckon what's going to say that's strong if you give him this ayah. هكذا. And as for this hadith, kilta yadayhi yameen, they say it means both of his hands are right hands. I'd say to a Wahhabi, so right there, what you just said right there out of your mouth should be enough for you, that for you to think twice about your situation. Because you want to convince me that God has two hands and both of them are right hands. So that means he doesn't have a hand on the left side. So then he's going to say, we don't know how Allah is. So it's like he's saying, you should be as silly as me, as I don't know what I'm talking about. Just believe it. Question 91. What is the proof that wajh means self in this particular verse? Which verse is that? This is the verse in Surah Ar-Rahman. So if you knew the answer, then that's good. The proof that wajh means self in this ayah in Surah Ar-Rahman. Let's see if we can break this down here. Allah says, وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everlasting is wajhu Rabbik. The wajh of your Lord, with the U sound, sound. Everlasting is the wajhu of your Lord, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, with the sound also. What that means is, I'll try to keep this simple as possible. This means Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. That's one of the names of Allah, as you know, one of his 99 names. And you can hear by the sound, Dhu, and you can hear that sound, Dhu, sound, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, because you could say Dhal Jalal or Dhil Jalal, depends on where it is in the sentence. So in this sentence, it's Dhul Jalal, so that sound there, with this sound here, wajhu, وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. This proves that Dhul Jalali wal Ikram is wajhu Rabbik. Not just Rabbik. Not just Rabbik. Rabbik, your Lord, with E sound. E, Rabbik. If what was meant here in this ayah, that Dhul Jalali wal Ikram is Rabbik, then it would have been the, so that the sound matches. It would have said, Wajhu Rabbika Dhil Jalali wal Ikram. Then the would go back to Rabbik with the same sound. But since it's dhu, it doesn't go back to Rabbik, goes back to wajhu. Wajhu Rabbik, the wajh of your Lord. So the wajh of your Lord is Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. So someone might say, but isn't your Lord Dhul Jalali wal Ikram? Yes, he is. So someone might say, so then that's what it means, right? Your Lord, he's Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. Rabbik. Say, your Lord is Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. But dhu here doesn't go back to Rabbik. You can tell by the difference of the sound. Dhu here goes back to wajhu. So what does wajhu Rabbik mean? It means actually the self of your Lord. Or if I flip those words around, your Lord himself. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, your Lord himself remains. ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. That's correct. Now, would you be surprised if an ignorant Wahhabi argues with you about that? Of course not. They don't fear Allah so that they don't say something without knowledge. They don't mind being wrong without knowing they're wrong. So here's another ayah that proves the point. Tabarak asmu rabbik. It's in the same surah, last ayah of Surah Ar-Rahman. Tabarak asmu rabbika dhil jalali wal ikram. Glorified is ismu rabbik, dhil jalali wal ikram, the name of your Lord. Dhil jalali wal ikram. Subhanallah, something I just realized now that I didn't realize before. It's very strong. Here. So what does it go back to by the sound? It goes back to Rabbik, because that's the same E sound. Doesn't go back to Ismu Rabbik, because if Dhil Jalali wal Ikram goes back to Ismu, then it would be Dhul Jalali wal Ikram to match Ismu. But it's not. And now we could say, and isn't Dhul Jalali wal Ikram one of the names of Allah? It is. This is what I didn't realize before. It says the name of your Lord. Dhul Jalali wal Ikram is the name of your Lord, isn't it? It is. So it's not valid. It goes back to name. The name of your Lord. Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, which is one of his names, doesn't go back there. It goes back to Rabbik by the sound. We know. Tabarak asmu rabbika dhil jalali wal ikram. So look there. Dhil jalali wal ikram, or you could say dhu or that, depending on where it is in the sentence. It is ismu rabbik. It is the name of your Lord, isn't it? It is. Yani, it's one of his names, I mean to say. But doesn't go back to ismu here. It does mean glorified is your Lord's name, but doesn't mean Dhil Jalali wal Ikram is that name. That's not what it means here. Tabarak asmu rabbik, glorified is your Lord's name. So, not what's that name, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. Rather, it's who's your Lord, Dhil Jalali wal Ikram. That's the meaning. Is that clear? So then wajh in the previous ayah is wajhu, that is dhul jalali wal ikram. And does dhul jalali wal ikram mean name here? No, it means God himself. Dhul jalali wal ikram is God. So wajhu rabbik is God. It means God himself, your Lord himself. Tell me, please, if that's clear or it's not clear. All clear? Inshallah. Okay. Question 92. What does it mean to say that if Allah willed something, He says to it, be, and it shall be? Yani, you know that refers to the ayah of the Qur'an. And it's actually more than one. يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. He says to it, if He willed for something, He says to it, be, and it is. Yeah, I want to change this here. Not it shall be, it is. Be. He says to it, kun, be, fayakun, and it is. There, okay. So what's the meaning of that? The meaning of that has two explanations according to Sunni Muslims. Some said it means Allah creates easily and without any delay. Nothing prevents what He willed to come into existence from coming into existence whenever He willed for it. And some of them say it means Allah speaks with His eternal speech that's not a language. And with this eternal speech, He commands for something to be, and He commands it in eternity, not in time. Like, not that He's going to command something tomorrow and He wasn't commanding it. Whatever's going to exist tomorrow, not that He's going to say tomorrow, now be, and then it will exist. No. In eternity, He said for a thing to be, whenever its time is for it to be. And He said that with an uncreated speech. Yes, correct answer. It emphasizes how He can bring anything into existence with ease. According to the Maturidis, or Imam al-Maturidi. That's how he explained it. And then others explained it the other way that I just mentioned for you. Jayid. And according to the Wahhabis, of course, means Allah speaks with letters and sounds. And whenever He creates something, He says, kun, 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 kun. Because He's always creating something. So, in fact, He creates uncountable things simultaneously, even. But the Wahhabi doesn't think that far. Let's stop there.